Damian Hernandez, in looking at some of the comments that have come to our videos here in the past week or so, believes that in this, is apples and oranges in regards to evaluating recruiting classes in South Florida because they're all loaded, but believes that the 2021 class is even more so top end than it typically is.
2021 top end is pretty supreme. It's there's a lot of really good guys on the top end. If you're talking about Terrence Lewis, who was at Miami Northwestern, he transferred to Chaminade. Whether you're talking about Marcus Tate from University School, who's already committed to Clemson, whether you're talking about James Williams, the safety, who's 7 feet tall with a 9-foot wingspan and everything like that, and other guys at the top of the class, there's a lot of talent. And even as you go a little bit below those top 5 or 6 guys, there's a lot of depth of that high 3-star, would be a 4-star if they lived anywhere else, because you can't make everybody in South Florida 4 stars and up. There's a lot of talent. And this again comes down to the fact that, Miami has to hit on their share of the top end talent that they want locally. You got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it.
I would be somewhat beating a dead horse if this was in the same conversation, but we've been removed from this conversation for several months. But I'm going to bring it back to I just want to clarify this and get your thoughts, because
please,
again, there are politics that find their way into such rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Because there have been you and others who have said, for example, if a commit is firm in his commitment, he could be the 10th best player in the nation, or regarded to that degree. But if he's not selling magazines and subscriptions, then he may become the 30th best player.
Look, I'll put it to you like this. Thad Franklin, who was committed to Miami, decommitted. He's a running back at Chaminade. He ran for 333 yards and 5 touchdowns, both a record in the 3A championship game this past year. Then he just recommitted to Miami 4 days before 247 released their updated rankings. And all of a sudden, he's dropped about 50 places. You don't got to look far. You know what I mean? And it's been consistent. But there's just your latest evidence thereof. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but continue.
And that's basically what I was getting at, is that let's go to some ridiculous extreme. Let's say if God could come down and tell us exactly who the best players are, 1 through 300, and he said the 100 best players in the nation are all playing in South Florida, the recruiting services would find some way to disperse those rankings and make sure that they're scattered across the country.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's one of those things we say, well, you cannot have that many good players, the lack of resources, and then you can't put all the recruiting resources or whatever in the one place. And then it's the right hand washing the left hand too, because you get credentials, or because recruiting writers aren't technically journalists in that way. So they kind of have credentials. You can get into the schools and to the games and go meet with the coaches and everything like that. And it's you got to have a connection with them to get the information and put that out there. And you have your things that go behind paywalls and whatnot. And that's your proprietary information that you get from the access that you gain to these players. But it's a symbiotic relationship. So if you're not going to rank them in that kind of a way, these guys from Texas or California or whatever, or whomever, wherever, all of a sudden your phone calls don't get answered, or, oh, coach is in a meeting and I'll give him a message, or you show up and you're persona non grata, which I've seen from a couple of schools down in South Florida for a couple of people, because and I've heard it out of the officials from these schools. You took a crap on insert player here, and you didn't know that he was from whatever, North Sparta State University. I just made up a school. Yeah. That used to be in my NCAA, but you know what I mean? You didn't know that he went here, and then you wrote that article about him. And then, so it got back to us at the schoolhouse. Therefore, henceforth, no, you're not. So it's it's an intricate balancing act that they do have to pull. But there are so many guys, and this is where it is not fair, because you only have X amount of numbers because you're working off percentages and, like only a certain percentage of the recruiting class available players are going to be 5 stars and 4 stars, and you can't just give them all. It's just like when the opening regional comes to South Florida as the first or second stop, and they give out 4 tickets to the opening finals. And you're like, yo, you should have 13, 15 or more players from here that I looked at who are going to the opening finals. But you're like, we can only give out 5 or 6 because we got to save the other ones. And maybe after, we're always evaluating and whatnot. So you're going to go other places and see other guys who are not as good. And then you're going to circle back and then give me my second, my hand-me-down invite, instead of giving it to me now on the front end, because then you're going to look like, oh, well, I did too much in South Florida. I gave too many out, or things like that. That trickles down to the recruiting sites as well. And I don't know that there is a fix for it, but it is kind of what it is.